Well, look, if we aren't back at a nice stormy shack with a nice stormy Fatima, among nice stormy winds with trees, they're just so happy to see us. Look at them dancing. Dancing trees. Isn't that wonderful? Don't you love dancing trees? I love dancing trees. Let me tell you what. Today, I'm here to talk to you about prophets and some of the things I've learned about prophets by studying, and some of the things I've noticed, and some of the beliefs I've come to, and, well, some minor corrections of previous things I've stated. Well, here, actually, first, let me talk to this lady because she has a nice red cloak. You're not nothing but a craven, sweetie. It's okay. You give me jellyfish. How can you be a craven? That's what you should think. You should think, oh, yes, jellyfish can't be craven. I mean, you can be craving some jellyfish. Oh, I'm sorry, my joke didn't seem to be helping. Anyway, so recently I saw this video on another channel, and it was a really good video about Ramakrishna and the life of Ramakrishna. Uh, and one of the things that popped up in the video is I knew that Ramakrishna had, at least for a little while, practiced Islam and had learned about Islam from a Sufi, and was there's a mosque like right next to Dakshineshwar, and that was like the temple where Ramakrishna was a priest of Kali. And he went to the mosque, and I guess he was talking to this guy, and he decided to become a Muslim. So for 3 days, he practiced hardcore as a Muslim. He did nothing but, Muslim prayers and all that stuff. And on day three, he apparently had a vision. I didn't know about this part. He apparently had a vision of Muhammad, and Muhammad uh, was there, and then Muhammad faded into um, Allah, and then he and Allah became one. And I guess Ramakrishna knew then that Islam was a correct religion, and or a religion that can lead you to God. So then I was like, oh well, I've had my quibbles with Islam in the past. I am a kitty who used to be a Muslim but is no longer. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? I have frequently asked God questions when I'm not certain about something. So, I was like, okay. So I sat down, I prayed, and I meditated on it, and then I asked God, like, hey, is Muhammad a prophet? As in, like, a prophet is someone that you've given at least part of a message to, or maybe a whole message to. And God told me yes. In a vision. Um, Nothing particularly fantastic, just, heard the voice of God, heard God say yes. Uh, I could get into that later, but that's what happened there. And I was like, well, egg on my face, because I have been saying for a while now that I didn't really think Muhammad was a prophet, that I didn't really believe in him. I mean, I believe that you could use Islam to get close to God, because I mean, we have lots of Muslims, lots of Sufis and others who have gotten very close to God by following Islam, so I knew that. But I guess it was partially my own stubbornness, partially my own, like, I had, like a past with Islam. Okay, I thought that that was far enough away. I was not far enough away. I had my own past with Islam that made me kind of reluctant to accept Islam, or like accept Muhammad as a prophet, right? So that was part of my thing. But now I've asked God, and God has told me yes, Muhammad was in fact a prophet. And although, that doesn't mean that you have to follow Islam 100% to the T, and that doesn't mean that Islam is 100% correct on everything. And I'll get into what exactly that means here in a minute. But so I had to amend that. So yes, now I have to accept Muhammad as a prophet because I asked God, and God said yes. So I was like, oh well, okay then. And it was kind of interesting. I'm going to have to. I mean, I kind of know what I think about that and why that is, or like some of the issues I had. I know why that's not actually as big of an issue. I'll get into that later. I think I might just make a separate video about Muhammad. But anyway, so I decided that I wanted to clarify like what I meant when I said someone was a prophet, some of the things I've learned over the years, some of the conclusions I've come to, all that fine stuff. Look at these pretty birdies. Hello. Oh, you're probably gonna fly away. Oh, yep, that's okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to see if I could get a little closer. But okay. But you know, those are pretty birdies. Um, so something that we should note about prophets is that I think one of the very first things I'm going to say about prophets is that prophets can be very useful, but we shouldn't necessarily cling on to them. We all have different stages in our spiritual development where we're going to need different levels of guidance, and we're going to need different levels of rules, and we're going to need different levels of like basically like safety bars and caution and things like that, right? Um, it's often very useful to follow a religious path, and kind of use it as like basically, you know, training wheels to kind of get you to know more information and understand more and find out like what religious practices work for you. But similar to Ramakrishna, I think that you should try out different religious paths and explore them. I think you should try out um, what it means to be a Muslim, maybe, or what it means to be a Jewish, or what, or you know, maybe not Jewish because that's a much longer conversion process, or you know, like to learn and to study these paths and maybe to incorporate some of their practices into your own. You know, like what is it that modern heathens believe? What is it that modern Gnostics believe? What is that not ancient Gnostics and heathens believed? What is it that ancient Christians believed? All these different things, and you know, like learn as much as you can and try to imbibe that and try to like live and think about it and understand it. Sometimes you'll find that one particular religious path just kind of works for you. You'll feel a very strong connection to the figure of Christ and maybe Christianity, or maybe you'll feel a very strong connection to Muhammad, or maybe you'll feel a very strong connection to a Hindu guru or the Buddha or someone like it. You feel different connections depending on who you are. Me, for instance, I feel a very strong connection to Ma Kali, to Krishna, to Jesus, and to, you know, very specifically in terms of teacher Ramakrishna. So there's lots of different teachers out there that you can look at and follow, and lots of different paths for you to look into. Different things will appeal to you at different times and at different levels, and that's great. You should also consider this fact that I've learned is that different religions kind of operate on different levels of truth. You will find as you explore that there's a lot of different levels of truth out there. Where, like, from one perspective, one thing can be true, but then from another perspective, it's not true. You see, the ultimate high truth, as I have been able to discover it, is that we are all ultimately part of, you know, Shiva, Shakti, Brahman. We are a part of this greater consciousness. We are the witness consciousness. That is what we really are. And on the highest level of truth, that's what we are. We are beyond all this stuff, all of these trees, all these other things. These are just appearances within Brahman. They are part of an illusion, part of the divine game. When we live our lives, we are living out the role of a person. We are living out the role of a spiritual seeker. That's, you know, God wanting to play the role of a spiritual seeker. Ultimately, that's the thing. There's this higher truth there. But the thing that we often tend to forget as we go through these various different paths is that not everyone can immediately go to that and have it make full sense and really have it be satisfying. Sometimes you're going to want to spend a path in almost a. So, non dualism is basically the highest level of truth as I've been able to see it. But sometimes you're going to want to spend time in devotional service. Sometimes you're going to want to spend time in just deep meditation and contemplation. And sometimes you're just going to, you know, have a hard time coming to grips with ultimate reality. Now, that doesn't make you lesser. That doesn't mean that you're bad or anything like that, or that you should look down on yourself or be angry with yourself. We all have different parts to play in this huge game, in this huge divine play of the Divine Mother. We all have these different parts to play. So you should enjoy your part, recognize the truth that, we're all part of this big play, and, try to have fun with it. Now, take that truth and look at the prophets. Look at different prophets. Different prophets will kind of give you different messages and things like that. If you look, for instance, in the Bible, there are 48 prophets and I believe 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses. These are people all who came to Israel. And then there's other people who went to other nations, briefly mentioned, and the Talmud talks about how there's way more than that, but these are the ones who have an eternal message for us to follow and things like that. Some of those prophets, their message seems like it's very much bound at the time. It's very much, the main point of their messages doesn't really apply to us on a greater scale today. And some prophets will have these messages that will ring throughout the ages, basically, like that. Stuff like that. All right. There we go. Ooh, thank you for some flash. Very much. Excellent. I hope he has fun. But yeah, so there's different levels of prophets and there's different levels of messages. Some prophets will give messages from the divine that are very useful for beyond their time. Other prophets will give messages that if you read them seem like, and they're not very useful to you at the moment, or they can seem like they're very much bound to the time in which they were given this message. There's different stages of evolution of religion as well. The best evolution of religion is, this idea that, we should love God and come to embrace God and become part, or not become part, but recognize that we are part and parcel of God. But there are different stages of religion and there are different stages of understanding and wisdom and things like that. And another thing is we should also remember that prophets aren't necessarily given all of their message. Sometimes what happens is prophets will get part of a message and they'll be told to go do something. And then they themselves will extrapolate further on that, or people around them afterwards in history will extrapolate further things okay, well, because the prophet said this is what this means, etc., etc. A lot of it is people's interpretation of messages, and the Divine Mother will give people messages that are usually make a lot of sense in the moment, but can have some interpretation later on, and some people will be much more useful to you in your individual cases and things like that. So you should examine what prophets say, but don't necessarily cling on to everything they say. Yeah, there's sometimes it's good to have a sort of safety net of clinging to what a prophet says and trying to follow a prophet and trying to follow all the different teachings that they lay out and things like that. And other times it's much more difficult and you will have to, kind of re-examine what a prophet says multiple times, and sometimes you'll have to, you know, uh, you might want to at certain stages in your life simply say, okay, I accept this authority. But I would say that the ultimate healthy stage is to question and to move beyond, simple obedience and things like that, and try to move more towards your own greater understanding. So you shouldn't just grab onto a prophet or grab onto a spiritual teacher and just accept everything they say. Sometimes you'll be at a part in your path where strictly following a religious teacher will be good for you, though, like I said. So prophets represent different levels of enlightenment. They represent different levels of messages. They represent different levels of all this different stuff. Some people, simply put, are not ready for the higher truths for a variety of reasons. And, sometimes this can take them multiple lifetimes to get there, or sometimes it's simply that when it's first presented to them in this lifetime, it won't make sense at first, but then they might come back to it later. Some people are very stubborn. Some people will get to a certain point. Ultimately, you should try to acknowledge the highest truth you can and try to get as close to God as you possibly can, or the gods if you wish to take a polytheist bent to it. Whatever. That's um, like one of the main things. And I will also say that I personally believe that there are sentient life way out there in the universe, in other places. The universe is large enough that I truly believe there are other sentient life, and they will have their own prophets in some cases. Um, and if we ever learn about them, you can take information from them too. Life will give you many lessons itself too, as well. Like while you're walking around the path, you'll get your own lessons, and sometimes they'll conflict with the prophet. Don't worry about it. Don't think that a prophet is like some end all be all authority over your life and that you have to follow everything they say. Don't also think that every prophet is like a perfect moral teacher. Don't think that. That's just basically religion trying to interfere with your spirituality. And the reason I put those two together, and some people would say, well, they don't like the whole term I'm spiritual but not religious. Religion to me is at least partially about following the rules and following certain guidelines and principles. Spirituality is much more about the exploration and the path, or like your own path. We could get into quibbles about all that stuff, but this is the main thing I've learned. Different prophets have different messages. You can read about all different kinds of prophets, and we are currently in an age of great learning and understanding where we can now learn about prophets from all around the world. And we can take their messages and we can learn from them and we can go with them and we can think about what they mean and we can apply them to our lives in different ways. And sometimes a message will actually have multiple meanings where in one area of your life it'll mean one thing and in another area of your life it'll mean another. You got to be willing to sit there and interpret. And if you don't want to take all your time to interpret, I understand. A lot of us are very busy. You might just follow a religious path. You might just follow a pre-designed religious path of being a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a Hindu, a Buddhist, a whatever. Self-inquiry is very important, but it's also one of those things where a lot of us, they're not given as much time as the kitty's been given to look into all these different things. So you should investigate, but also understand that yes, you can hold on to these safety nets and these safety bars and use them if you want to. Understand that ultimately, the ultimate truth is well beyond anything that any one person could ever tell you. No one person is going to be able to tell you the whole truth. And no one person is ever going to be able to completely describe God, because God is so beyond all of this stuff that there is no one person that has 100% and all of the stuff that's going to be needed. Every path can be presented to you, and it will have enough that you can use it to grow close to God. You can see that the Sufis get very close to God. You can see a lot of Christian mystics get very close to God, etc. A lot of people get very close to God or their gods, etc. Understand that these different paths can all still work, but just don't take all of them as 100% the literal truth. There is a much higher truth that transcends all these different paths, that we are, ultimately connected to God, that is the much grander truth, and these different religious paths can take us to that truth in different ways and from different perspectives and things like that. So think about this. Remember, don't cling to any one teacher. Remember that there's always time for you to investigate and look at other teachers. And remember, you don't have to follow any one religion, and that God is willing to guide you along a wide variety of different paths. So that's what prophets are. Prophets are basically um, training wheels. They can be very useful, but you should not imbue them with all divine authority all the time. And you should still be willing to think for yourself. Okay? Well, I hope you enjoyed my little talk about prophets, and I hope you all have a absolutely wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye.